Now for today's program. Kati Marton has combined a career as a writer with human rights advocacy. She is an award-winning journalist and a former reporter for NPR, ABC News, The Times of London, and The Wall Street Journal, as well as many other news outlets. She is the former chair of the Committee to Protect Journalists, as well as the former chair of the International Women's Health Coalition, in addition to serving on many boards like Human Rights Watch. A New York Times bestselling author, some of Kati's books include Enemies of the People, My Family's Journey to America, which was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award. She is also author of The Great Escape, Nine Jews Who Fled Hitler and Changed the World, Wallenberg, The Incredible True Story of the Man Who Saved the Jews of Budapest, and The Chancellor, The Remarkable Odyssey of Angela Merkel. Joining Kati today is Jennifer Bardi, Moment Deputy Editor. Before coming to Moment, Jennifer worked in science communications at the Scripps Research Institute for over a decade and was the editor-in-chief of the Humanist magazine for 14 years. Most recently, Jennifer was managing editor at Spirituality and Health. Please welcome Kati Marton and Jennifer Bardi.
Well, thank you, Suzanne, and welcome, Kati. Thank you so much for joining us today for this really important program.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I feel very honored to be part of this, and I think it is yeah, quite an urgently needed conversation.
Absolutely. And I did want to welcome all of our Moment Live viewers and to encourage you to put questions in the chat. We'll have a Q&A at the end. So just to begin, a year ago, when we started to sort of conceptualize this idea of the strong man and looking at the strong man, for one of our big question symposiums, we were looking at leaders across the world, authoritarian, autocratic, and otherwise illiberal leaders who are gaining power. And then, of course, when we published the symposium this last fall, we were on the heels of the US presidential election. And today we find ourselves witnessing an executive power grab that really has so many of the hallmarks of a strongman rule. And so we have so much to talk about, Kati, and really I know that the here and now is sort of on everyone's minds, and we will talk about that. I do also want to, pull back a little bit here and there and really look at this kind of the historical context, but also just the international context, and really ask, for your insights and expertise in this type, the strong man, right? So how do they rise? How do they fall? And so to start, in your entry, there were 15 people who did the symposium, and Kati, you were one. You wrote about a handful of strongmen, Putin of Russia, Orban, of course, of Hungary, your native Hungary, Modi in India, Erdogan in Turkey, and then also Giorgia Meloni, a woman in Italy. These were just some. And you said they all seem to kind of be operating on with the same playbook. And so I wanted to start by asking you, what are some of the characteristics of the strongman ruler and the tactics they use to grab and hold on to power?
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's a lot to chew over for us, Jennifer. Well, for one thing, they don't start out in the strongman mold. I mean, certainly Viktor Orban, who I guess I'm most familiar with in good ways and bad, was a very promising young reformist Democrat when I first encountered him in 1989, when he sprang on the stage at the reburial of the fallen heroes of the Hungarian Revolution, and announced that a new day had dawned in Hungary, and that democracy had finally arrived, and asked for the Russians, who were still, this was the last days really of the Cold War, asked for the Russians to leave. And so here we are, flash forward, how many years between 89 and 2025? You do the math. What is that? 40 some. Here his best friend is Putin. He is Putin's, you can call him Putin's agent in the European Union. And what happened? But not only is Putin his best friend, Trump is his second best friend, or I don't know. He'd probably right now put Trump in the top slot. But what happens is that he won an election and then he lost an election and then he decided never going to trust the will of the people again
Mhm.
because they in their lack of wisdom they defeated me. So I'm gonna next time I get in, I'm going to make sure that that there's no way that I can be defeated. And I'm dwelling on Hungary because it has assumed an outsized importance in the, shall we call them, the club of autocrats,
Mhm.
because sad to say, it's a successful model. What he did is now being followed by a bunch of countries. We'll get to them, including our own.
Mhm.
He and our president, Trump, have drawn very close. He's Orban has been to Mar-a-Lago more often than any other head of state, and Trump has openly expressed his admiration for this autocrat and for what he's been able to achieve. And so we need to keep our eye on how Orban did that because that's the playbook
Mhm.
that our president is now copying. And of course, there are many differences, obviously, between the United States and Hungary. Hungary being a country with minimal experience of democracy. And but our democracy, as we speak, is being tested, and we are being tested. So I'm really pleased that we're having this conversation because I think honestly, Jennifer, it's on us, really, on us as citizens to to take a stand, to speak
Mhm.
out, each of us in our own, every one of us, listen, viewers and readers of Moment. We each have a platform of some sort, and
Mhm.
we can't slink away and wait for the next election because I return to the bad model of Hungary. How quickly
Mhm.
the guardrails can fall if we are not engaged and if we don't take a stand, each of us.
Mhm. And I think, having this symposium to, and I really do encourage people to read it. We can learn. I mean, we are in this moment, but I think we can look at sort of what's worked for these rulers. How did they convince people, right, that they
Yes.
were going to do everything for them? What are these tactics that we can identify now as a way to learn from and as you
Yeah.
said, push back against. So when you're, I think you and others have written about some of these characteristics. So there's
Mm,
this
mm.
kind of macho swagger.
Yes, yes. The masculine toxic, in my view, masculine charisma.
Mhm.
We have one woman in this mix, Meloni, which is remarkable, really, that there because Italy is a fairly macho country, but she's following the male. She's part of the so-called Brothers of Italy, so not Sisters of Italy, Brothers of Italy. So yes, charm and charisma are enormously important. So not one of these people, not Erdogan, not Putin, not Modi, not Trump, not Trump. I mean, not Bolsonaro. None of them is a gray bureaucrat. They all have a great deal of is easily saleable charisma. And each of them identifies not so much with a political party, but with a nation.
Mhm.
So it's almost a tribal leader. They make themselves into the embodiment of the nation.
Mhm.
And each of them, each of the above, harkens back to the nation's origin story, often fictionalized. You know,
Mhm.
simpler days when we were a single tribe. We were not forced to take in strangers crossing our borders. We were not dealing with gender issues. They're all one of the things they all have in common is that they're virulently anti-LGBTQ.
Mhm.
So that's a common. There are only two genders for all of these people, and they are anti-feminist. Even Maloney,
Mhm.
a woman's place is in the home,
Mhm.
except for herself.
Right.
Um, and the times that they want to restore, which by the way never existed. I mean, Erdogan, the president of Turkey, has brought back the good old Ottoman days. There was nothing good about those days, but he's mythologized the when Turkey was a big power and respected,
Mhm.
and has promised that Turkey can be, will be, is on the way to being a big power not to be messed with on the international stage. Orban has done exactly the same in Hungary. Hungary has a terrible history. You know, I'm a product of two of the great catastrophes of recent Hungarian history. My grandparents perished in the Holocaust, and I saw my parents arrested by the communists. So, two experiments with humanity that had terrible outcomes, and yet the Orban and his supporters don't do not deal with the nightmarish chapters in Hungary's history. They deal with when well, the slogan "Make Hungary Great Again." That, by the way, that's a slogan that they all use. So so this backward look, not forward, but backward, is something they all have in common, and they have common enemies, and prime among them is crazy, but George Soros, a gentleman now of advanced years. I think Soros is well into his 90s, and it's been a long time since he traveled to his homeland of Hungary. But Orban, who owes part of his education, his Oxford University education, to a scholarship from George Soros, um, turned him into his demon of choice. His mug, Soros's face, was wrapped on every bus stand, even on sidewalks, so people were forced to step on it, and very much uh, coded reference to the fact that he was Jewish, which also resonates unfortunately in many parts of the world. And here's an ironic fact. Because of the friendship between Viktor Orban and Bibi Netanyahu, and Orban's support of the more right-wing Jewish sects in Hungary, um, Hungary has become a kind of a magnet for Orthodox Jews,
Mhm.
who, I don't know, are they oblivious to Hungary's history? Or what kind of a deal is that? I find that really bizarre and
Yeah.
disturbing, as I'm of Hungarian Jewish background. I was, as you may know, because I've written about it, I was not told that my grandparents were deported by Eichmann to Auschwitz. I had to learn that when I was writing my first book, which was a biography of Raoul Wallenberg, and just by chance, I was interviewing somebody who who knew my grandparents and said, well, unfortunately, Wallenberg arrived too late for them. And that's how I learned. So my parents were, and I raise this because it's not uncommon phenomenon. My parents were suffering from post-traumatic stress, lifelong. They never got over the fact that they couldn't save their parents. They were in Budapest, hidden by, sheltered by Christians. But and this is all of this to say that a terrible background of anti-Semitism, and now Orban and Netanyahu both target George Soros. Why? Because he's a liberal, because he funds, many liberal causes, and so he's their shared. Putin also targets Soros, who, by the way, George Soros has done many really, really wonderful things for not only his country of birth, but he was the first to establish, civil society there when anyway. So they have common enemies. These the autocrats have common enemies: LGBTQ, George Soros, anybody, the European Union is one of their shared enemies because the EU has liberal values, humanitarian values, and that threatens all of these people. And now they have tremendous support from Elon Musk and social media, and that is a completely new phenomenon in this conversation.
Right. Oh yeah.
Because Musk has unlimited funds and is wreaking havoc in Germany, supporting the far right there, and trying in Great Britain also. And the social media, I think, is an extraordinarily perilous factor, unregulated, and really we haven't yet begun to grapple with the kind of wild west of social media and how quickly it can arouse people.
Well, let me just jump in. Kati, I think you've answered all of my questions.
Oh no.
No, I'm kidding. But so we've got this kind of this strongman. They're sort of narcissistic. They're
Yes.
charismatic. They in many cases they're obviously ambitious, amoral, transactional. But just to kind of cover some of the things I think we've identified in the symposium that they, and you've already talked about some of it. They align themselves with oligarchs and billionaires, a la Elon Musk, and they but those of us who are hearing some of these people speak, and we're sort of shaken to our bones, their followers are hearing something completely different. I mean,
Yes.
they're hearing, I see you. I see that you've been disrespected. I see that you have been treated unfairly. And then of course, as opposed to these groups that I'm vilifying, immigrants and LGBTQ and women and
Yes.
DEI recipients.
Right.
And
Yes.
so, they're the followers are hearing this and they're thinking, this is a strong man. This is
Yes.
exactly what we need.
Yes. Yes.
And so
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
dangerous. It's obviously very dangerous.
Very seductive, very seductive. The promise of easy answers and the strong man's promise that I will protect you.
Mhm.
All the world is opposed to you, to us. But I will stand up to you. I mean, Trump told his followers that my vengeance will be your vengeance, or words to that effect. They all follow that script of only I will defend you. Putin says it to Russians and plays to their sense of grievance that you've been misunderstood. I mean, the world moves at such at such speed. It's very disorienting to people, particularly people who are not uh, in the red hot center of the mediatic world, let's say, but who feel disoriented by the speed of change. And these guys all promise a return, a restoration, if you will, to simpler days. And it's an impossible promise to keep, but it sure sounds good, and it just plays to people's sense of grievance, which is global. Modi's population feels it as much as our MAGA
Hmm.
folk do, and
Well, I mean,
we have to deal with that, and we have to do, frankly, a better job, Jennifer, than we have done
mhm,
of talking to them. And they're our citizens. They're not going away. We're not going away. We've got to learn to listen
mhm.
to each other. And obviously, we haven't done a good job with that.
Right. Well, right, and finding, what are those kernels of truth in some of
Yes,
these, you
there
know,
are.
grievances or, but so
Absolutely.
so thinking about, well, let's talk about Orban and Musk. I mean, I think that I wanted to bring up USAID, the
Yes.
fact
Yeah,
that you know Orban met with Trump and Musk at Mar-a-Lago in December, and as you said, I mean they're in communication. It's a two-way street. Um, I mean, do you think that really what was at the heart of dismantling the entire USAID was
yes,
because of the efforts, and George Soros is also vilified for this, but efforts to ensure fair elections across the world and prop up, independent
100%.
media and
Yes,
encourage
yes.
whistleblowing and things like that. I mean, do you think that was really the crux of that attack?
Yeah, I just, a lot of this they're doing because they can. Because we the people have never have never confronted such an onslaught. I mean, from day one, Trump too was ready to go,
Mhm.
and we were frankly um, flat-footed. And I think we've really got to up our game because they're going to keep going,
Mhm.
and because we haven't had an administration with all the levers, with so many of the levers of power. I mean, the Congress, the courts.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, the courts are being tested, but certainly um, hard to have confidence in the Supreme Court, which is really Trump's Supreme Court.
Mhm.
So, and this is key, the media.
Yes.
This was one of the first things that Viktor Orban did, was to disenfranchise the media, the Hungarian media, which is now speaks with one voice, with some very faint exceptions. Now, this is still a kind of soft authoritarianism. They no longer, my parents were jailed for being uh, vigorous journalists who covered all the news that was fit to print in Hungary. They were Hungarians, but they were working for American wire services, and so eventually they were the last ones left, and they had to be jailed.
Mhm.
That isn't happening yet. They're just
Mhm.
driven out of business. Orban's cronies buy up media, and there's no reward for media companies in dissent. And we have to be on guard for that because we already see CBS, Washington Post, Los Angeles Times, you know, kowtowing. Well, maybe kowtowing is too strong a word, but bending at the knee to avoid confrontation, because nobody wants to be on the receiving end of what Trump and his people can dish out. It's fear, as I learned as a small child, is the most powerful weapon and preemptive fear. So,
Mhm.
I'm not going to I'm not going to wait for them to get me. I'm just going to censor myself. I'm just not going to.
Mhm.
I tuned into 60 Minutes Sunday because there's so much news happening, and I thought, well, surely they'll have a profile or two of I don't know what's happening to USAID or something like that. All three interviews were entertainers.
Oh,
And I just thought, oh, I hope that's not
yeah.
the start of the beginning of a new regime there, a regime based on fear of lawsuits. I mean, I don't want to be a target of a lawsuit, and neither do you. It's a terribly time consuming and expensive
Mhm.
because you need to lawyer up. So that's a huge factor too. And we in the media community have to really be solidly united. It's not to say that we all support the same candidate, but we have to support certain values. That
Mhm.
we
Mhm.
really have to be foursquare behind those values, and that's what's at stake now. Is what do we even stand for as a nation? It's tough going. It's tough going.
Well, and I think, yeah, I mean, we are getting so much information right now, and it's hard,
Yes.
like I said, I mean, it can be hard to stay on top of it, but imagine if it just stopped, if that flow of information stopped, and so, and I know, like at the Pentagon, they canceled subscriptions to New York Times, and
Yes.
they wanted to, it's
Politico.
like, oh, we
Yeah.
need to evolve, we need to get other meat outlets in there, like Breitbart and so forth. But
Yep.
I'm curious, Kati, in Hungary, I mean, you said there is some semblance of an independent media. I mean, how,
Yes.
like,
Yes.
how does it really operate?
Flickering. And we can thank Open Society, George Soros's organization, for encouraging, the many voices instead of the one. I honestly don't know if Open Society is still doing that, but certainly in the early days when in the post-communism days, it was George Soros who encouraged that. And so, my late husband and I, Ambassador Richard Holbrooke, and I were married in Budapest.
Mhm.
And Richard, who there was no separation between his public and his private life, and he was in those days uh, the Balkan negotiator for President Clinton. He's the one who negotiated the end to the war in Bosnia, and he announced at our wedding dinner, attended by the entire Hungarian cabinet, not exactly a cozy family affair, but he announced that in marrying Kati, me, he was welcoming Hungary into the European family of democracies. And George um, Viktor Orban befriended us, and in years to come, whenever we would go to Budapest, which was a staging ground for Richard's Balkan negotiations, so we went often. Um, we saw Orban socially, and he was a different man. So I raised that for a couple of reasons. One is how quickly these autocrats are essentially non-ideologues. They are opportunistic,
Mhm.
and there is great opportunity for them now with Trump in the White House to assert themselves, and they will all be coming for sure to get their White House photo op, because that plays well at home for all of them. I mean, we're still the United States of America. We haven't suddenly become Luxembourg. And so it's they will draw sustenance from Trump
Hmm.
in the White House. You know, as Orban already has, he's translated Trump's support to support for himself. And it'll be interesting to see, because he's very close to Putin. It'll be interesting to see to what extent um, the Trump-Putin relationship plays
Hmm.
out,
Hmm.
because
Oh,
you know, that's something we need to keep our eye on, and particularly how it impacts on Ukraine, because Ukraine is now extremely vulnerable and very reliant, has been until now, on American support, but that's no longer
hmm.
reliable, obviously. So, you know, everything is in play. Everything is being tested. It's one of those, you know, there's so many cliches, but it is a pivot point
Hmm.
um, for that you and I have not experienced in our lifetime, when everything is at play.
Um, I mean, just what you're saying, the world order. I mean, you have the superpower of the United States. If we are actually being, if we're going down that road, we're in
Yes,
sort of
yes,
authoritarian territory
yes.
here.
Yeah, and the imperialist swagger, the
Yeah,
imperialist, you
and
know, okay, you know, we can take Greenland.
right.
Yeah,
um,
why not?
you
Yeah.
definitely want to get to the Gaza question, but you know that I think that for a long time it was okay. Yes, you have Putin, you have Orban, you have these different, and also like in Latin America too, in Brazil and in El Salvador, but
Yes. Yes.
but anyway, you thought, well, okay, it matters, and how America looks on the world stage matters, and we have these alliances, but it is all different. It's all different, and so thinking about how Americans of conscience, and even
Yes.
Americans who will say, hey, what he's doing is for us. It's good. It's okay to put America first, right? These are arguments you hear. Um,
Yeah.
I think that as much as we can remind them what these kind of diplomatic or what these kind of soft power things, what they get us, how they help keep us safe, but also how they sort of help the world. But my question is thinking about how strong men are
Yes.
weakened, their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities, right? how
Yes.
how can we how can we delve into
Expose.
those and expose those and talk about those more?
Yeah. Well, eventually, like all things human, they do pass from the world stage, but before that happens, they can do just tremendous damage. And so and they can usher in their chosen heirs. I mean, you know, JD Vance is clearly eager to be the chosen heir, and I don't know. I don't know how you feel about JD Vance and his leadership, but ne never mind his leadership. It's his lack of what I consider basic values, basic American values. He doesn't really seem to cherish those. And above all, they don't seem to respect um, the whole basis of our democracy is checks and balances. And that is really in play now. Who's going to check? Who's going to balance? Because the implication now is that anybody who tries to check the president is being unpatriotic, un-American, whatever. So it's, you know, we're having this conversation at a moment of maximum peril. For Hungary, a much smaller and much uh, a country with shallow democratic roots, it's the strong man is now so firmly implanted that I fear only another strong man
Hmm.
can replace him. But one prays, and there is in fact someone who's giving him a run for his money at the moment, from his own world, from his party, and from his circle,
Hmm.
um, and who is not exactly a shining Democrat, but the if the world stands by and just kind of says, well, that's just the way they roll over there. Um, that's that's a really dangerous example. And if we don't support, for example, Ukraine, which is playing this kind of essential role on behalf of all of us, because he's blocking, he continues to block the takeover of his country by Russian by force of Russian arms. I saw Soviet tanks roll into my country when I was a little kid in the 50s, and they don't tend to roll out very fast. So um, the Europeans now have as great a challenge as they've had since the Second World War, because they really can't rely on Washington until now, their protector and defender, and um, their military bulwark.
Hmm.
So do we want to be a nation that's based entirely on our transactional swagger, on are we just about real estate deals, and which is what basically what Trump is telling us, that, oh, it's you know it's there's always a deal to be made. There's And it's astonishing that we have a leader with as little familiarity
Hmm.
with our institutions and our Constitution as our current president. I mean, to become an American citizen, I was already in school learning about the Constitution, but I had to pass a test. And I don't think he could pass.
Hmm.
How a bill becomes a law and all that. And the kind of sacred rule of the separation of
Hmm.
powers, which, if we're not, sorry, I'm repeating myself, but if we're not vigilant at the
Hmm.
moment, and if we don't find um, people who represent us, not only ably, but with an ability to communicate. I'm not calling for a strong man, but I am calling for someone who can reach people on a human level, not on a bureaucratic, procedural level.
Hmm.
We need
Hmm.
somebody who can speak to that which unites us. And charisma is not necessarily a bad thing, you know?
Right.
Charisma can be a very good thing if used on behalf of the rest of us, as opposed to self-enrichment, which is
Hmm.
what all these people who we're
Hmm.
talking about, the Club of Autocrats,
Yeah.
they are not only are they extraordinarily rich from politics, and it certainly isn't from their salaries, but their families have gotten fabulously rich. So that's why they don't, well, that's why Netanyahu doesn't want to give up his office, um, because he faces, like Orban too, um, the possibility of jail
Hmm.
for
Right. Right. Yeah.
for all the deals. So, wow, I mean, we've got we've got our work cut out for us. We really do. We really do. And the media, again, I emphasize, the media plays a big role. The media has to be courageous,
Mhm.
and above all, the media owners who really have not, for the most part, stepped up to the historic challenge of today. They have got to develop more of a spine,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
so much depends on their willingness to weather a lawsuit, and because they're coming fast and furiously, and nobody wants a lawsuit. Nobody wants an IRS investigation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if we start, if we dust ourselves off after this really stunning defeat, I'll amend that. It wasn't that stunning a defeat because when you look at the numbers, it's not this sweeping mandate that is constantly referred to. It's not at all.
Well, unfortunately, most Americans didn't vote. I mean,
Yes,
the
yes.
non-voters who sort of, turned
Yeah,
out.
and how is that? Yeah, how do they rationalize that now? And those who didn't vote because nah, Kamala isn't exactly the right person at I mean, it's never going to be, only we are perfect. The candidates are never perfect.
Well, looking at kind of, you know, breaking the spell or
Yes, yes, yes. That's the right
I mean,
way to
I,
put it.
I think
Yeah,
that yes, I mean appeals to and charismatic appeals to American values and all of those I think are very important. But what is the role of just trying to break through the misinformation
yeah,
and using social media to do so? But
yeah,
some of the other people in the symposium talked about that the strong man might lose sight of what the public cares about and implement bad and unpopular policies. Sometimes that can sort of crack. I mean, I think that this idea of China, I mean, some
yes,
of the
yes,
moves that Trump is making. I'm going to quote Samantha Power here, who wrote killing USAID is a win for autocrats everywhere. She says future generations will marvel that it wasn't China's actions that eroded US standing in global security, paving the way for Beijing to be the partner of choice around the world. Instead, it was an American president and
yeah,
the billionaire he unleashed to shoot first and aim later.
yeah.
And so, this kind of shoot first, aim later approach, in some ways, is that a vulnerability? Is that sort of a lazy strong man?
Yeah, I mean, he is a lazy, strong man, but he has tremendous assets in that he's utterly without shame or reality is what the old expression, who are you going to believe, me or your eyes? And he has really
Mhm.
um, mesmerized his followers, who obviously were looking for affirmation that they weren't getting from either party.
Mhm.
Because Trump is not a Republican. I mean, he's Trump. Uh,
Sure.
yeah, and we have to take the hit. We missed so much. We I mean, I'm not an overly political person, but I do have values,
Mhm.
and for the most part, um, embodied by the Democrats. But I was another reference to Richard Holbrooke when Richard and I moved it. He was the American ambassador to the UN, and our first house guests when we moved into the official residence, which is in the Waldorf Towers.
Mhm.
Richard said, "Let's invite President and Mrs. Bush to be our first," because they had lived in the same, because Bush the elder
Uh-huh.
had, and I said, "You think they'll come?" Well, they were there the next weekend, and we had a great time.
Mhm.
Uh, Elder Bush and Barbara Bush, and we invited, a bunch of Republicans, because in those days Republicans socialized with Democrats. We invited Democrats and Republicans, and everybody had a great time. And that was only 20 years ago. And then that was considered normal
Mhm.
because we were all Americans. We were all on the same side. And
Mhm.
and now, we've come to demonize each other to such an extent. And, sadly, Washington is now not a place where congressmen and senators actually live with their families, and which was also a way of of humanizing each other, because when your kids go to the same schools and your wives, your spouses are in the same, I don't know, book clubs, whatever. I mean, you have human interaction.
Hmm.
And I don't think that, are you in Washington?
Just outside. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
okay. So you're in Washington. I'm in New York. Um, I don't think that's happening anymore. That kind of random interaction where, the party affiliation really recedes, and it's human to human.
mhm.
We've kind of lost that, and we, it's really on us, and to build that back, and to one human at a time, to pay attention to what we missed, and persuade people that above all we're Americans.
Right. Yeah, I was having a conversation about Tesla, and I said I don't want to live in a country where based on the kind of car someone drives, I know just what
Oh,
kind of person they are and whether I want to associate with them or not. But I do, and before we get to the Q&A, I want to, this is we as Jewish audience, and um,
yes,
I think that this issue, this bluster and this strongman kind of imperialist approach to Gaza that took everybody by surprise. I mean, I really do think it took
yes.
everybody by surprise last week. What do you think? I mean, how does this play? How is this part of the strongman playbook, or how do you think that his supporters largely are seeing this? I mean, is this
Yeah.
America first? I don't.
Um, I'm very much a silver lining kind of hopeless optimist, although these days it's challenging. But I the whole subject of the Middle East and the two-state solution, and finding a way out of the morass has just been allowed to fester for way too long without any bright new ideas. So
Mhm,
here comes one, not in my view a bright one, but something that got everybody's attention. And, maybe it'll be the opening move in finally having an all principles conference, which I think is what's necessary
mhm,
um, to climb out of this. And, I mean, obviously there's a pathetic lack of leadership among the Palestinians, and Israelis are, I mean, they're a nation that's traumatized from the October 7th, and still waiting for hostages to be returned. So it's probably a bit early to talk about bold new steps regarding the two-state solution, but um, but let's not wait too long
mhm,
to figure out what to do, because it's not about building beautiful condos for people. It's people don't like to give up their plot of land, however rubble filled it is. People, I mean, I know that I'm a refugee, and my parents never stopped thinking about the house they once had in
mhm,
in Budapest, despite the fact that it's not like the Hungarians were very kind to them, but that was their home, and that was their language, and that was their familiar world. And people don't like to, it's not like, that's not a matter of transaction, offer me a better condo. Let's
mhm,
let's let's deal with the fact that these people feel, if they're, I mean, I'm freelancing here, but if we move them out of Gaza, let's assure them the right to return,
mhm, mhm.
you know?
Which Trump has said no, that's not
Well,
true.
yes, but he said no, and he doesn't have the right to say that. It's not his to say. And there has to be pushback. Okay, let's have, all the stakeholders, all the wealthy Arab nations help in clearing the rubble and in starting the reconstruction, but with the proviso that the Palestinian transfer will be temporary. That, I mean, that could change the entire conversation. If, okay, you can't live there. It's now not I haven't been to Gaza. I hope to go soon because I think it should be seen. But let's give them hope. That's the one thing that they don't have. And when people don't have hope, they do desperate things. And then along comes the strong man who says, "Leave it to me.
Right, right.
Um, I will get you. I will bring justice. I will, just let me do it." Um, which is, therein lies fascism and Nazism, and we don't want to go there, but we can't put off dealing with the Palestinian the Palestinian population,
Hmm.
which clings to that
Hmm. I
that
mean, do you think that there were maybe it was a misstep? I mean, just in terms of the hostages, not I mean, it just put a halt in the hostage release
yeah, yeah.
schedule. I mean, I think everyone's hoping that that continues. That they
Oh
continue
my
to.
God, yes, yes. It has to. It has to. But neither side has great leadership at the moment.
Mhm.
I
Right.
mean, but who does? I mean, where do you see any Mandelas on the world stage, or even close? I don't.
Yeah, I'm getting a signal from Suzanne that we have some questions.
Oh, good. Okay.
This
And
has
it's
been a
been
wide ranging, but I mean, I knew that we would have, lots to talk about. So we
well,
could just
you're a great
cover
interlocutor.
it some other time.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you both so much for that very important conversation. One person wants to know what about checks and balances and what happens if Trump or Vance or Musk ignore what the courts order? Is there any
Ah,
control?
yeah. Well, this is the crucial question now is who's going to enforce that? And I think so far the courts have done the right thing for the most part. But I don't have tremendous faith in the Supreme Court, which is where it might end up. So, but if we as citizens show, greater engagement and interest and involvement, starting at the local level and all the way up, if we, as I said, if we dust ourselves off and say, okay, this is a moment, um, and um, and we need to, I mean, we still have elected leaders and we still have, midterms that will be upon us all too soon. So, but it's a time, it's not a time to sit back and let things unfold without our engagement at every level.
Mhm.
Um, we all have friends who fear ICE, who may have all their papers in order, but are fearful nevertheless because maybe there's one thing they don't have. It's and in small communities, I live in New York City where there isn't that level of fear, but no, but my son lives in a small town in California where there's a lot of fear, a
Uh,
lot of fear.
what advice do you have to folks on the left? The right, for the most part, has coalesced around Trump and Musk.
Yes.
But the left is kind of without a leader, and there's a lot of different opinions. And so, as you said before, we're not in a time where people come together on either side of the aisle. What is your advice to those within one party
Yeah.
um, to help fight this?
Yes. Well, we are leaderless at the moment. We on the non-MAGA side, and still kind of stunned by the outcome and the speed with which this is unfolding. But we at the local level, we have congressmen, we have mayors, we have governors, who all need to hear from us. And the Democrats have to get their act together, and we need a more promising leadership, frankly. We need a new generation. And you and I could both list some pretty dynamic governors who might fill that slot. But until now, they haven't had that chance because we all thought Joe Biden was going to. We could talk about that.
Yeah, and can I just jump in for 1 sec?
Yeah,
I think I'm going to give the symposium one more plug.
Yeah, which I
good.
put, by the way, I put a link in the chat for everybody.
Just because Kati and others talk about, there are some practical things that are offered. I mean, I think that in addition to calling, if you live in a red state, calling your representative, but when I think it was Ruth Ben-Ghiat talked about that when the financial elites and the business
Yes,
sector, when they start to realize the strong man, it's not going so well, or that the promises aren't being kept, that can really turn the tide. And so I think maybe there's some room there to think about a different type of protest, and
yeah,
different applying pressure in different areas that we don't normally think of as checks and
yeah,
balances. But it's more of just the money. I mean,
yes,
um, so
yes,
that's one idea I would put out there, and
yes.
or I think whoever said it put it better than I did.
Um,
No, but that's an important point. And also, I happen to write books, and I'm a big fan of books. And I would urge people to pick up a history book from the 30s, and see how that went down, and how the European nations, starting obviously with the German people and the German financial community and corporate supporters of Hitler, how delusional they were about their ability to control what they had unleashed. And we know how that ended. So I'm not saying we're embarked on that route, but it would really be useful for people to study history for precedents for this, because we're in the early stages of something new here. And we can't just that the majority of our children get their news from TikTok, for example. I mean, people under 30 and under 20, they don't read the New York Times. Hopefully they watch and read Moment, but we need to urge them and their teachers and their we all have communities to
right.
look at historic precedents for this era, and there are many. I mean, the 30s cries out to be examined.
Kati, if I may keep you for just a few more
Sure,
minutes,
sure.
I just a quick. I wanted to be able to get in there. Two people wrote in, kind of give a little bit of an opposite view, saying many are happy with Trump because they feel he's the first president that is really standing up to Hamas. And then somebody else wrote in, as a Canadian Jew of Hungarian birth, I don't find it bizarre at all that Orthodox Jews are gravitating to Hungary, unlike what leaders permit right here in this person's hometown of Toronto.
Mm.
Orban's being vigilant and responsible by preventing the country to be taken over by anti-Zionists and anti-Semites. Many Jews in Hungary are praying that he stays in power for the next many years, and that they feel safer in Budapest than in Toronto right now. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to offer just, there's some other thoughts on this as well. And then lastly, to wrap up, are there other countries that we should be keeping an eye on? As this person said, there's a lot of anti-Semitism now in Canada. We see what's happening in Australia. Somebody asked about Le Pen in France. The next election coming up in a country that we're not really aware of that we
Yeah.
should be.
Yes, and how about Germany, which has the most fearsome history in this regard, um, where Elon Musk has embraced with funds and with his presence the Alternative für Deutschland, which is frankly very scary because that is fascist adjacent, very anti-Semitic. And they speak in codes for the most part, but everybody understands. And they now have a huge supporter in Elon Musk. So, it's an incredibly complicated global situation, but Jews never thrive in autocratic societies. Jews thrive in liberal societies, and so I don't think that it's in the interest of Hungarian Jews to have an authoritarian dictator as the head of state, because an authoritarian dictator can act on his whim, and if he has a falling out with let's say Netanyahu, things could change in a heartbeat. And who would cover that? When my parents were arrested, as they were falsely accused of being CIA agents, there was no one left, since they were the last independent journalists in Hungary, there was no one left to cover their arrest or trial. Because, the old saying about first they came from my,
Right.
whatever, and then they
Right.
came
We're all
from me.
familiar with that. Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So, we can't, single out one community to protect and the others can fend for themselves. We need for people's freedoms and values to be uniformly assured. We can't just have one group that does well under a dictatorship, because Orban can. I've seen him change. He was a reformist, and now he's Putin and Trump's best friend. So that's not a man I would really like to rely on.
Well, and on that note, I think your point about reading books, not listening to TikTok, and engaging in conversations like this. So I thank both you, Kati, and Jennifer for this great conversation. As Jennifer said, the allure, what is the allure of the strong man, is on Moment's website. It was the cover of one of our issues, and I will be sending that out in a follow-up email. Thank you both. Again, please go to momentmag.com, register for Thursday's program with Middle East analyst Aaron David Miller to hear more updates about the situation in Israel. Thank you all, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Thanks,
you.
Jennifer. Thanks, Suzanne.
Bye.